I am a massive fan of ultra-wide monitors, sometimes to quite ridiculous extremes. And OLED is currently by far the best screen technology when it comes to your picture quality. And when it comes to comparing against mini LED with multiple dimming zones, there is just no comparison. So in this video, I wanted to help those of you who keep asking me between the 49-inch Samsung G9 OLED and the 45-inch LG UltraGear OLED, which one is better, and look at something which I've been pondering for a while now, which is when is ultra-wide too ultra-wide? Because the answer is, well, it depends. Firstly, a quick thank you to LG for sponsoring this video. Now, Samsung also sent out their G9 OLED for me to compare it with, since I literally just sold my own G9 OLED. And I'll also tell you more about what I replaced that with in this video. So first off, let's start off with the specs. And the 45-inch LG UltraGear has a 21:9 aspect ratio, running at a resolution of 3440 by 1440 at 240 Hz, and a 0.03 millisecond response time, which is literally splitting hairs right now. It's pretty impressive. There's also support for G-Sync and FreeSync, and with an 800R curve, which more on that in just a moment. Whereas the 49-inch Samsung G9 OLED, on the other hand, runs a wider 32:9 aspect ratio at a resolution of 5120 by 1440, again at 240 Hz, and the same 0.03 millisecond response time. It's a lot of specs. It officially supports FreeSync and has a shallower 1800R curve. Now, for those of you who care about how your monitor looks, the good news is that both of these OLED displays look, in my opinion at least, pretty damn good. Like, the Samsung has a very thin, sleek silver finish that runs across the whole back of the monitor. The LG goes for this all black finish, also super thin all the way around, but it does turn into a bit of a thick boy in the center.
That's what she said.
Both of them have colored LEDs on the back, and this is where I think the LG pulls ahead slightly from the Samsung, as even though the Samsung has this beautiful ring at the back, once you place it up against a wall, even with all the lights switched off in your room, you can barely tell that it's on. Like, the LG LEDs are better. They're still not as good as just, sticking on an LED strip on the back of your screen if you like the whole kind of mood lighting effect, but it is better than the Samsungs. The stand, however, could do with some improvement. Now, I really like the new design on the Samsung OLED screen here. It's a really thin profile, and it means you can use all the space underneath your screen better, whereas the LG UltraGear still has the more traditional kind of two-legged approach, whilst, well, depend on the depth of your desk, can make it quite challenging just to fit anything on your desk. Regardless, I usually throw any screen onto my favorite monitor arm, which I'll link down below, since it just saves you a ton of space underneath and even turns it into something more usable as well. But the thing most people care about when buying a screen, of course, is, well, of course, the screen itself. And here we have LG's WQHD versus Samsung QD OLED technology. And the fact of the matter is, both of these technologies are better than something like mini LED when it comes to color and contrast. Like, mini LED just can't come close, particularly with like bright white areas where light will just bleed into darker areas. Now, mini LED does go brighter, but honestly, I've never had any issues with anything I've ever done, both across gaming and productivity on these OLED screens. Now, the other difference is that the LG is a WQHD screen, whereas the Samsung is a QD OLED. And without getting like super technical, it's a small difference in the technology inside these screens, which enables them to show the rich colors that they're able to, but they both do look very, very similar. But while they do both have quite similar technologies inside, they are both very, very different. We have the LG's 800R curve running 84 pixels per inch at up to 240 Hz with a matte finish on the screen. Compare this to Samsung's 1800R curve, which runs at a higher 109 pixels per inch, also up to 240 Hz, but with a glossy finish. And I'm gonna tackle this one by one here because I find there are two or even three opinions here. You've got the one saying the LG's pixels per inch is too low and that the matte finish is awful, and the ones that saying Samsung's 1800R curve is too flat and the glossy finish is too reflective. So just hold that thought for one moment. And firstly, the curve. Now, personally, I find the 800R curve way more comfortable to use than the 1800R curve. Just the way it wraps around you like this sort of cockpit. It doesn't matter if you're gaming or even just using your desktop, having an 800R curve is much less straining. Now, the 1800R curve on the Samsung isn't really that curvy at all once you actually sit down in front of it. I find myself having to look and in some cases even lean over to see the edges. I know it's definitely one of those like first world type of problems to have, but I love a lot about the Samsung G9 screens. Like, I've reviewed so many of them over the years and they all had 1000R curves. So I'm not really sure why they chose to go back to this flatter 1800R curve. The next one is the pixels per inch, and there is no doubt that the text looks sharper on the desktop on the Samsung. The LG, I feel, should really have a higher pixels per inch than 84, and if you are buying buying this mostly for productivity, then you should probably not buy this monitor and instead try the Samsung instead. But whilst the LG does lack on the desktop side of things, it gains massively in gaming, and more on that in just a second. And then finally, let's tackle the whole question over the matte versus the glossy finish. So for me, there is a slight difference in clarity and color between the two screens, but there is also a lot going on here. You've got the differences in WOLED versus QD OLED, the pixels per inch, the curve. Now, what I will say is that if you intend to use the screen in a bright room, then a matte finish will help you avoid, seeing reflections that will be more prominent on a glossy finish. But to be fair to both of these screens, I've got a ton of bright lights on in front of me right now. I haven't had any issues whatsoever, and I've never once thought to myself, oh, I wish this screen was glossy, or I wish this was matte. But I still appreciate why you might feel totally different than I do about this. And in fact, in the reflections here, you can only really see the reflection on the matte screen and not the glossy screen, which is a bit odd. Now, something I do think is an easy win for the LG though is the software. Now, you can use the included remote controls on both of these monitors, and on the LGs you can use it to quickly and easily change inputs and adjust your settings. The Samsung isn't that bad, but firstly, the remote is more geared towards using it as a TV than a monitor. There are no buttons to change the input, for example, and the overall Tizen interface, whilst it does look pretty, can be a bit sluggish at times. Now, if you want to quickly change inputs or head into picture-by-picture mode, it generally takes longer and requires way more button presses to get there on the Samsung than the LG does with its more efficient remote control. We all know you are not buying these screens for software or remote controls. You're either buying them for one of two things, gaming or productivity, or perhaps a mixture of both. And this is where I think the picture gets a little clearer. Get it? Because as far as gaming goes, both screens perform incredibly well. Now, what I would say here is that the LG is the better all-round gaming screen. Because of its 21:9 aspect ratio, a lot more games support it. It also performs incredibly well, whether you're playing a FPS or racing strategy or basically anything. And because of that 21:9 ratio, your gaming PC doesn't have to drive like those extra pixels on the side that you do with the Samsung, which for the most part just allow you to see, more in only the games that really support that wider resolution. Now, it also, at least to me, feels more comfortable playing games in 21:9. Whereas with the 32:9 on the Samsung, if you are a heavy gamer, then you're going to be spending a lot of time just looking around the screen, particularly as many games still place information and heads-up displays around the what's now very, very far edges from where you want to be looking, which is the center of the screen. In 21:9 on the LG, you can quickly glance at mini-maps without really taking your eyes off the game. And particularly if you're hoping to hit 100, 200, even 300 plus FPS in the games, then the lower resolution of the LG will give you better overall results. Now, I recently finished building my gaming PC underneath here, which is a 14th gen Intel i9 149,000K and a 7900 XTX card to really try and push all these screens we get in for review. And at native resolution on the LG, on max settings, I was able to hit 130, 140 FPS in Fortnite. But same game, same settings over on the Samsung, again, native resolution, I was able to hit only 90 to 100. So you will get better performance from the LG, with one exception though, and that's if you're building a racing sim with just one, super wide screen, in which case, of course, the G9 is probably the best one here, because whilst performance is important, of course, that just wider field of view will work better for you if you're happy, to compromise slightly on the max FPS that you're going to get. And also, there is one caveat I kind of skipped over there, and that is having a machine that both supports and is capable of pushing those kind of refresh rates is quite rare. I would always say it's great to future-proof, so, why not grab a 240Hz screen now? It makes total sense, even if your machine isn't powerful enough yet. But just be aware that even with the latest hardware, you may still struggle to hit those max FPS when using the highest quality game settings. But with all of that said, I'm going to completely reverse all I just said and talking about productivity now, because I think the Samsung is the best productivity monitor. Now, since the vertical resolution is the same on both of these monitors, even though the LG is taller, the wider resolution of the G9 means you actually fit more on your screen at any one time. You don't get any extra vertical height on either of these. You can have your Spotify playlist open, you can have your email, web browser, Discord, all open at the same time and comfortably be able to use and see all of them. You also get 99.5% DCI-P3 color accuracy over 98.5 on the LG. And if you are a video editor, that combination of better color accuracy and that huge just ultra-wide view for your video timeline is just insane. But there is a problem though, because on the Samsung, I struggled to connect my Mac. The USB-C to DisplayPort cable didn't work, and I eventually had to pull out my old CalDigit dock and connect via that to get 120 Hz working on my Mac. Now, compare this to the LG, and using a single USB-C to DisplayPort cable, I immediately got 240 Hz with HDR and VRR enabled. That's pretty good. And I've used these Samsung screens for a very long time now, like we're talking years. And I've previously had to buy an app, I think it's called ScreenResX, to try and force the screen into the resolution and refresh rate that I know it can do, but it just refuses to at times. But if you are a PC user or a Mac user that's happy to, run through a dock and still only get 120 Hertz, then for productivity at least, the Samsung, at least for me, wins here. I just wish that for the price, they both include either a USB-C or Thunderbolt 4 port on the back to just make it hooking up a Mac just a bunch easier. Now, there are a few other issues to consider when buying either one of these screens though. Now, I've heard a lot of people voice their concerns about burn-in on these OLED panels, whether it's the heads-up display from the games you play daily or the menu bars from whichever desktop operating system you're using. And it is a valid concern, but in reality, I don't think it's really much of a worry. Like, take to Reddit, and there are plenty of people sharing their experiences of putting thousands of hours onto their screens without any issues. And don't forget that both the Samsung and the LG feature burn-in protection features, which kind of shift the pixels around to protect from that. But if you really are concerned, just avoid leaving your screen on a single static image for hours like this. And just consider using maybe a screensaver because, hey, maybe it will save your screen. Now, the next one is a question about how warm you like to keep your room, because something I've come to know a lot about, well, Samsung screens I've tested over all the years, they do a really, really good job at helping to keep your room warm. And it's particularly helpful in colder winter months. Now, comparing the two, the Samsung screen was around 8 to 10 degrees Celsius warmer than the LG screen. And when combined with the new gaming PC I built recently, they make my decently sized kind of man cave here one of the warmest rooms in the house. Now, I have noticed this divide, especially more so recently after upgrading and building my own gaming PC and upgrading to the Samsung 57-inch monitor. And I do wonder if we are really starting to get to the stage where ultra-wide screens are just getting too ultra-wide. Like, they are great for productivity and great for specific use cases on like racing sims. But for most pure gamers looking to play a variety of games, the 45-inch LG UltraGear is a damn good screen. And I'm just so excited now as we hopefully, really hopefully, start seeing improvements such as higher resolution and support for USB-C come to these OLED panels. So a huge thank you to my Patreons for supporting my work. I've literally just set it up. You can head to the link in the description down below to catch the after show and help support my work. Until the next one, cheers, bye-bye.